It's a great honor to be here with you, and I think it's morning time in Korea. So good morning, esteemed colleagues, graduate students, and I would want to emphasize that I normally describe our graduate students as our junior colleagues because we work very closely with graduate students, and one day they become our colleagues, right? Working at a university as faculty member. And so thank you all for joining this seminar. And before I start today's presentation, I would really like to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Khu for the warm invitation. And way before I became a faculty member, I knew that Kyunghee University has one of the best hospitality and tourism programs in the world, not only in Korea, but in the world. So with my first-hand experience working with both Hyun-Soo Kim and also another student, Haley Shin, and also some of the very well-known professors at Kyunghee University, I know the quality of the work performed by this university as well as the students coming from your program. So it's a great honor for me to meet with each and every one of you at Kyunghee University. And in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the evolution of the evolutionary dynamics of the sharing economy, past, present, and future. So what I'm going to do is I will first talk a little bit about my bio, my personal background. I know very often when we look at different scholars from different parts of the world, we see the detailed bio, but a lot of the information comes from the qualification, the education, as well as the publication record. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit more about my life experiences before I became a PhD student as well as a faculty member. And then I will focus on a program of research on the sharing economy and basically how I got started with this stream of research, why I had the interest to start this research endeavor back in 2016, 2017. And I will present a number of studies that I have conducted with some brief description of the results. But at the second part of the presentation, I'm going to focus more on one very recent study that I worked with a couple of researchers from both the marketing discipline as well as communications and integrated marketing communications department at Northwestern University in the United States. And at the end, I will identify some avenues for future research. And at the end, I will have some time for Q&A. And so at that time, faculty members, students can ask any questions you may have. So a short bio about myself. I was born in southern part of China. I was born in a very poor fishing village, and the photo that's in front of you now is exactly where I spent the first 8-9 years of my lifetime as a little kid. But at that time, my mother wanted both my sister and myself to have better education. So at the age of 9, our family moved to a bigger city, also in southern part of China. And in grade 5 and grade 6, I didn't know anything that I need to do except study. So my entire focus was on preparing for the secondary school exam. So I did really well in my mathematics as well as my English. But at that time, kids really started learning English at grade 4, right? So a little bit different from other parts of the world. And when everything was going really well, then our family decided to make another change. We moved to Hong Kong. So our family moved to Hong Kong, and I was a teenager at that time. Hong Kong was, when I got there, very vibrant city, a lot going on, a lot of distractions. Started going to secondary school. I didn't really want to study. I didn't see why I needed to study. A lot of my friends started working and, in different industries. They could make money very quickly. And one day they can earn money to buy a pair of Levi's jeans, right? Teenagers love Levi's jeans. And I said to my dad, I want to work, go and take me and go and work with you. My dad was a construction worker. I did that for 3 months. I said, this is exactly the place that I worked at for 3 months. My job was to carry tools, climbing up and down, and help the senior colleagues. And it was very, very tough and very, very dangerous. 3 months, I said, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. I needed a change. So my change was to get a bachelor's degree before 25 years old. So that was my goal. I went to look at different programs offered in Hong Kong, and I realized that the first thing that I need to overcome was to improve my English to the level that is enough for college education. So I started studying part-time English at this place for about 2 years. And during that 2 years, I would go to the bookstore, exactly this place, to check my level of English. So I was doing that for 2 years. I got to the point where I felt my English was good enough to understand the textbooks in business management. So I was looking at programs, and I started preparing for, English tests, TOEFL. Many of you are familiar with that. And at that time, my mom was a housewife. She saw that I was very serious about going back to school and studying again. She asked me, are you really serious about this? I said, yes, I'm very serious about this. I want to do this. And she said, I don't have a lot of money. I only have $20,000 in my bank account. If you promise me one thing, you can take my money and do whatever you like. Go and explore the world. I said, what is that? What do you want me to do? She said, when I get old, you look after me. I said, yes, no problem. So I took the $20,000. I took a big adventure in Australia. So my first landing spot was in Perth, Western Australia. I started to study in a diploma in hospitality management at the Australian School of Tourism and Hotel Management. The school guaranteed internship. So in the second month of my time in Australia, I started working in the housekeeping, doing internship across many different departments. Luckily enough, in the second month of my time, I rented a house. I rented 2 rooms to other students. I stayed in 1 room, so I didn't spend a lot of my mom's money. And so I could further my education. After 2 years, I moved to Griffith University. And just like 경희 University, Griffith University also has a very strong hospitality and tourism management program. My first intention was not to fail any courses, so I don't have to spend more money. And so I follow all my professors' suggestions, going to class, reading chapter, doing all the workshops, how to write assignment. I follow every single suggestion that they provided. So surprisingly, I did really well in my undergraduate degree. Out of the 24 courses that I took, I earned 21 high distinctions, 3 distinctions. Okay. And I wanted to further my education, but there was no scholarship for international students below the PhD level. So I wrote a letter to the president of the university in Australia, is the vice chancellor of the university, telling him my situation, asking him to give me a free education. give me the full scholarship. Waited for 3 months. He didn't get back to me. I worked in the hotel industry. I saved up money for half a year of tuition. And then at the beginning of the semester, he wrote me an email. He said, we are looking at your case. 1 week later, I got another email saying that you don't have to pay school fees. Continue your education. So I did my honors degree and I won first class honors as well as the university medal, which was awarded to two students of the 5 graduating students. So that guaranteed my full scholarships for my PhD studies. At the same time, I was doing graduate studies at Queensland University of Technology, focusing on mathematical sciences, majoring in statistics and statistical modeling. In 2012, I came to the US for the first time to attend the iCRE conference, where I met a lot of great colleagues and friends. And when I went back to Australia, I said to my advisor, I said, I wanted to try and work in the United States, and I wanted to focus on my publications. In end of 2013, I got the invitation to first do a telephone interview with the University of South Carolina, and they flew me into the United States, I think 26 hours altogether. And I did a 2-day interview at the University of South Carolina. I went back to Australia. They sent me an email. You recommended to the university, you will be getting an offer from our university. I said, okay, I'm going to the United States. So I started my tenure track position at the University of South Carolina. And in 2019, I earned an early tenure and early promotion to associate professor. And at the same time, I was also affiliated with the Smart State Center of Economic Excellence in Tourism and Economic Development at the same university. And in early 2020, I attended the graduate conference. I met people from Oklahoma State University. They told me about this opportunity. I explored a little bit further, and then I accepted the position to join Oklahoma State University in 2020. That's about me. And in terms of research.
Okay. Let me give my question to you about your career, your life career. Wow.
Absolutely.
Anyway, let me check again. You was born in southern China, poor town. You grown up there, and then transport to Hong Kong.
Yes.
And then you work a little bit in industry, and then you realize you need to study, and
Yes.
and then you try get to the Western Australia, Griffith University, and then you study hard there and get the degree from University of Queensland, and then finally again Griffith in PhD. And so you published a few several good journal papers, and then you got an interview, telephone interview with the University of South Carolina, and then South Carolina sponsored you, your transportation and your accommodation, fully support you from Australia to the South Carolina. They paid all money for your job interview, and then you finally got a job in the University of South Carolina from Australia.
Yes.
And then you invited to again Oklahoma State University because of your publication records. So you moved to the Oklahoma State University, and then you got the tenured associate professor in Oklahoma State University, right?
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. It's great achievement. Wow, it's surprising.
So I have moved, to different.
Wow, you are the symbol of self-made achievement person.
Thank you. I did a little bit, but I was a little bit lucky to have a lot of.
No lucky comes itself. Anyway, another one very important. He educates Hyunsu, and you make him professor. That's another big, big one.
Yeah.
Not only yourself.
He's very hardworking. He's very hardworking. I was
In
also
order to
have
become a
chance to
successful
work
person,
with
you
him.
must do hard work.
Yeah, and I look forward to interacting with more of the colleagues from Kyunghee University, and I know you guys do high quality work, and you have trained a lot of great students, and I know you also previously had a student and then went to Virginia Tech, now a faculty member at Hong Kong Poly, right?
Okay, he's my former student.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been a great journey, and from a research point of view, I'm very passionate about research, and I always personally want to focus on quality and impact of research. So my scholarly activities are really directed to conduct cutting-edge research that not only advances academic thought, but at the same time provides compelling insight to inform some industry practices. So my research interests focus on mainly services marketing and service management, with an emphasis on topics such as customer engagement, branding in the context of services, social media marketing, as well as the rise of the sharing economy. And most recently, and Hyung-soo and I and a couple of other researchers have started the stream of research focusing on the adoption of service robots, as well as the use of service robots, automation, artificial intelligence in the context of services. And because of my background in statistics, I'm also very interested in applications of advanced quantitative techniques and how the use of those techniques can offer a different perspective to understand the phenomena that we are studying in the context of tourism and hospitality management. And so during my time in Hong Kong, I started working part-time in the convention center. So I knew, events, convention, exhibitions, and big annual dinners, as well as weddings, etc. So those are also important elements within the tourism and hospitality industry. When I went to Australia, I started working in the housekeeping department. Very tough job, but that gave me the understanding of how important housekeeping is in the entire operation of the hotel property. I worked at a fine dining restaurant. The owners were couples. The wife used to be the sous chef of Hotel Intercontinental. The husband used to be the executive chef of Hotel Continental. And so working with them, I also saw the importance of customer service, superior level of customer service, in a fine dining restaurant. I worked as a bellboy in a hotel industry, 4-star hotel. And in that context, having that welcoming first impression makes a huge difference in customers' experience. And then during my time in Perth, I started working for international hotel chain property, the Sheraton. When I moved to Queensland, I got transferred to the Sheraton Mirage on the Gold Coast, working in various operational departments, including the pool bar, fine dining restaurant, seafood buffet restaurant, front office, banquets department. Lots of fun, hard work, but all these experiences gave me a very important message. As a PhD student, as a faculty member, as a member of a society, very often we encounter difficult situations in various aspects, right? But having a big smile on your face, it makes a huge difference, right? Things around you would change dramatically if you have that attitude, if you have that big smile on your face all the time. So now let's turn to a program of research on the sharing economy. And so when I was preparing this presentation, I really took some time to think about how I started this journey for this particular stream of research. So I went back to some of the PowerPoint slides that I prepared when I presented the first project on the sharing economy. So why the sharing economy? So in around 2015, 2016, around the world, there was a new wave of peer-to-peer, or what we call access-driven businesses that was really shaking up.
Yeah.
Excellent. So how I started this program of research on the sharing economy is that at that time, around 2015, 2016, around the world, there was this new wave of peer-to-peer access-driven businesses that was shaking up traditional industries like the hotel sector, as well as taxi. Whether borrowing goods, renting homes, or serving up micro skills in exchange for access or money, consumers at that time really started to show a robust appetite for the sharing-based economy. And for example, at that time, Airbnb with 7 million listings worldwide, the company actually gave users access to more rooms for rent than the top 5 hotel chains all combined. So that was a very powerful business model. However, Airbnb at that time did not own any apartment or any homes on its marketplace, right? And so the important phenomenon was also featured by the Time magazine at that time. The cover of the magazine in one issue described that strangers crashed my car, ate my food, and wore my pants, tales from the sharing economy. Basically, that was a huge wave of consumer consumption pattern changing in the global economy. So let's look at the history a little bit. Actually, in 2004, Harvard law professor published a paper in which he suggested that we share goods in the economic process. In 2009, authors Boltzmann and Roger defined the term collaborative consumption. And in the groundbreaking book that they published, named What's Mine is Yours, they described the potential of collaborative consumption. And in 2011, Time magazine again named collaborative consumption one of the 10 ideas that will change the world moving forward. In 2014, one of the big 4 auditing firms or accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, found that the global shared economy actually produced a total of $15 billion worth in terms of revenue. So looking at the development of the sharing economy, now we are seeing companies operating in transportation sector, such as Uber, Zipcar, etc., and BlaBlaCar, which is an important platform in Europe for long distance ride sharing. We now also have peer-to-peer lending in the finance sector, Lending Club, which also introduced a lot of peer-to-peer lending operations in many different parts of the world, including China. Consumer goods, we have Render, Runway, and many other similar companies that provide peer-to-peer sharing transactions for consumer goods. In space, right, we have Airbnb, which is basically renting out underutilized space that we have in our properties. We also have WeWork, which is office space sharing in a lot of cities like New York, Some companies may not need the office for the entire week. They can rent for 3 days, and another company or business owner can have the same office space for the rest of the week. Basically, you are sharing underutilized resources. In personal services, we have TaskRabbit, which is very popular here in the United States. Professional services, Elaine's Desk, etc. So all these are companies that have emerged adopting the notion of the sharing economy. PricewaterhouseCoopers actually earlier published a report estimating the total revenue generated by the traditional rental sector, which includes equipment rental, book rental, car rental, DVD rental, etc. At that time, in 2013, they estimated that the total revenue generated by the sharing economy sector was about $15 billion versus the $240 billion generated by the traditional rental sector. But by 2025, the total revenue generated by the sharing economy sector is going to be equal to the total revenue generated by the traditional rental sector, projecting the huge growth of the sharing economy moving forward. So with all the information and statistics at that time, I was thinking, well, the sharing economy is really getting very big and is growing very fast. I wanted to look at this phenomenon very, very closely in the next few years through my research endeavors. So the first question was why and how? So in 2016, I started a research project looking at self-efficacy, perceived value, and consumers' motivations to adopt ride-sharing mobile application. And at that time, we used Didi, which is the largest ride-sharing platform used in China. And I started working on multiple research projects looking at Uber in the United States, focusing on the technology acceptance model, the diffusion innovation theory, and the combination of the two. In 2018, one of my graduate students, myself, and also Dr. Heymun Oh, we worked on a research project, published this paper, Motivations and Constraints of Airbnb Users. And the paper was published in Tourism Management. Later on, I engaged in more research projects focusing on various aspects of the sharing economy with researchers both from tourism and hospitality, as well as the mainstream marketing literature. And I continued a series of studies focusing on this phenomenon and looking at different aspects as well as different contexts. And those are some of the recent papers that we have published. And I actually have published quite a few articles with Hyung-Soo on this topic as well. So it's really a very exciting journey for me to work with multiple researchers, multiple teams on the same research area. And so because this presentation is about past, present, and future, so I have to talk about some of the previous projects. So basically, we started looking at the sharing economy by focusing on consumer motivations behind the adoption of mobile applications. And this paper was published in probably one of the various first special issues on the topic of sharing economy by International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management. This paper also received the Highly Commended Paper Award in that year. And in that project, we investigated what motivated consumers to adopt one of the emerging mobile applications of the sharing economy or ride-sharing application. And so the results really provided important theoretical implications for innovation adoption research. And so we looked at innovation as the framework to capture ride sharing as a new innovation or a new consumption medium for consumers to do the same thing that they did previously, which was calling a taxi or getting a taxi somewhere, right? Using mobile application. And now probably a lot of us, when we travel overseas and to another destination, we are very familiar with this process already. We don't need to learn about that. And so in the next study, we looked at motivations and constraints of Airbnb consumers, because Airbnb was widely recognized as a huge disruptive innovation in the tourism industry. Although different studies were conducted to look at various factors that could affect consumers' adoption of Airbnb. However, at that time, most of the studies tended to focus on a small number of factors. And usually they study several factors in one study and then several factors in another study. So in this research, we adopted a sequential mixed methods approach and really provided a comprehensive examination of all the relevant factors that were considered as motivations and factors that were considered as constraints, and both work at the same time to regulate consumers' attitudes as well as behavior in terms of adopting or not adopting Airbnb as an alternative accommodation option.
Dr. So,
yes,
you said you used the mixed method approach. So what kind of a mixed method you apply for the paper? Okay,
so that's a great question. And so in this study at that time, because not a lot of research had been done to look at both motivations and constraints very comprehensively. So we first did in-depth interviews with individual participants, and we divided, because we at that time saw that people who had adopted Airbnb or used Airbnb before, they have very different evaluations and feeling about Airbnb versus those who had never used Airbnb before. So we purposefully separated two different parts for the qualitative phase of the research. First, we interviewed people who had never used Airbnb before, because for them, the constraints would seem very clear to them and salient to them. And then we interview a group of participants individually to understand those participants had used Airbnb in the past, so they had experience. So for them, it was much easier and much more salient in terms of identifying the motivational factors, right? What contributed to their decision to utilize Airbnb. And after that, we combined the findings from the literature as well as the qualitative phase to form a comprehensive model for us to be tested in a national survey. That's what we did for this research. And actually, this paper later on became one of the most highly downloaded and cited in tourism management. And again, it was a trend that was happening at that time.
Wow.
Probably if we now do another study looking at similar aspect, we may not be able to get this kind of attention. So at that time, that was a very timely study. That's how I would put it. Yeah.
Good. Great.
Okay. So this is another study, and I know you guys are probably familiar with Dr. Myung Jung, right? And so I worked with her and a PhD student on this project looking at consumer adoption of Uber mobile application and the research was published in Journal of Travel and Tourism Marketing. In this study, we integrated two very well-known theoretical models, the diffusion of innovation theory, as well as the technology acceptance model, to really understand how various factors, including relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, observability, as well as social influence, may contribute to perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use at that time with Uber, right? And it was relatively new for a lot of consumers at that time. But again, this has greatly changed in the last few years. Most travelers in the United States now know exactly how to use Uber. They have an account. It's so user-friendly that there's no difficulty to learn how to use it anymore. And with colleagues from China and also University of Denver, I did a study looking at psychological distances and how they affect guest loyalty with peer-to-peer accommodation. In that study, we used secondary data, mainly online observational data archived on a platform that is very similar to Airbnb, but it's the Chinese version of Airbnb. It's called the Xiaozhu.com, a leading peer-to-peer accommodation sharing platform in China. So we analyzed the data, and results suggest that from a consumer's perspective, when they make decisions to purchase or not to purchase from the host, a lot of other factors such as psychological distances could also contribute to their decision. And from a construal level theory perspective, which is a very dominant theoretical framework that researchers adopt in mainstream marketing as well as in social psychology, and we apply that theory in the context of peer-to-peer accommodation to really understand how the various psychological distance dimensions affect consumers in that particular context. And this is the next project that I did with a group of researchers, including Johan Wirtz from National University of Singapore. He's the author of a very widely adopted textbooks for services marketing, and he's also the vice dean of the MBA programs at National University of Singapore. And in this study, we actually, a group of researchers were participating in what we call the Thought Leadership Forum at Ohio State University. And basically, there were senior faculty members, mid-career faculty members participate in a two-day workshop to propose a conceptual paper, and then in the subsequent 1 year to finish this project. And the paper titled Platforms in the Peer-to-Peer Sharing Economy was published in the Journal of Service Management. In this paper, we examined peer-to-peer sharing platform business models and their sources of competitive advantage, their roles, motivations, and behaviors of key actors in the ecosystem. And so you will see that on this slide, the service ecosystem of the peer-to-peer economy incorporates multiple actors. How can we define the term peer-to-peer sharing economy, and what may be some of the different characteristics that informing our understanding of various forms of platforms within the sharing economy, which we will look at later on as well. And then later on, for the same research team, we observed that in the sharing economy or in the peer-to-peer accommodation sector, there is this phenomenon of convergence. Basically, what it means is that you have platform operators that are entering the pipeline business model. So Airbnb was building their own hotels. So they're entering the traditional hotel industry. And at the same time, you have Airbnb, so you have hotel companies like Marriott International establishing a peer-to-peer sharing platform that works just like Airbnb. So they're both entering each other's competitive space. So in this paper, in this project, we looked at this two-directional convergence of platform and pipeline business models, and what may be some of the characteristics and pathways of convergence, and what may be some of the important factors that they need to consider when they enter the space of the other side of the competition. So that was another project that we did. And then with Hyung-soo, and that was the first study that I actually worked with Hyung-soo when he started his PhD studies at the University of South Carolina. The first semester, we worked on this project as a conference paper to be presented at the graduate conference. In the same year, we submitted the paper to the Journal of Travel Research. It was published in that journal together with Dr. Heyman Oh from the University of South Carolina. In that project, we examined the different environmental stimuli of Airbnb experiences and how those environmental stimuli can create consumer enjoyment, which was underexplored at that time.
Okay, here, Kevin.
Yes.
I have a question. Former slide, the previous slide. Okay, you got the 5 co-authors. Actually, 5 authors is very hard to managing each other when you work with. So how can you start with those colleagues about a certain specific project? Can you tell us your know-how? And the second question is also know-how question. You have very good journal publication so far in tourism management and general service management, and almost a top-tier journal in our field. But as you know very well, in these days, the survey-based research is how to publish it in a certain top-tier journal. So what do you think about how can we able to publish it with the survey-based research approach toward tourism management and general travel research? This is my second question.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Thank you, Dr. Koo, for the 2 questions. So the first question, I think that's a great question, because for a lot of research projects that we have conducted, usually we don't have that many authors. And the reason that we started this one was we first had this experience together. So the Thought Leadership Forum was intended to bring at least 5-6 authors in one group to work on a conceptual paper. And so basically there was no data, and what they wanted to do is to decide on multiple topics or directions that are going to be the hot areas moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years. So basically, what we did was, in the first 2 days during the event, we of course we read a lot of relevant papers, especially the most recent papers, before we got to the event, and we had 2 days to really decide on the structure of the paper. And then we separated tasks. Everybody contributed certain part, and when I developed the part, particularly for consumer behavior, and that was an area that I was very familiar with, I did that part, and other co-authors contributed, edited my work. And then when they developed their part, I also did the same. That's how we did it together. But it turned out to be a a very good experience. Basically, you know, the co-author from Cornell University, she is a marketing researcher. She's not like, you know, she doesn't publish in hospitality tourism journals. Her area is mainly marketing. And then we have the first author who had a lot of experiences with mainstream publications, but at the same time, also very familiar with tourism and hospitality. The third author is a junior, at that time, junior faculty member, now mid-career faculty member at Boston University. He graduated from a hospitality and tourism program. And then the fourth author was a student of Dr. Anna Matila. So everybody contributed differently to the project. And that's how we got to this one, because we had a very good working relationship. And then we continued to the next project. At the beginning, we submitted a paper to a service management conference, and then we were asked whether we were interested in developing that into a full paper. So we did that. And then for subsequent studies, a lot of the projects that we did, most likely 3 authors, maximum 4 authors.
Okay, so my further question about your research collaboration. Actually, this seems like a particular skillful, competency for us. But when we work with other people, particularly what we should proceed our part, well, our competency. What do you think? Yeah, absolutely, there are some social skills as well as research skill, but
I think this is also a question that a lot of colleagues, students, when we have time, get together, something that we talk about. And I don't think there is a perfect answer, to be quite honest. But over time, we as a researcher, we know our work style. We know people who have worked with us. We know their working style. I think as long as there is a good match, there is what we call complementary skill set on the team. I think that's good. And every project that we worked on, the requirement would be different. The conceptual paper would be different. If I'm doing like a mixed methods research project, if I need someone who's got the skill set in qualitative, then the formation of the team would be different as well. However, at the end of the day, I think doing a research project, it has to be, result driven, but at the same time, it should be fun. Like we enjoy working with people that we like, right? We don't normally work with people who we don't feel we can work with. Doesn't matter how good the outcome is, that's probably not a good experience. And so in my personal experience, I enjoy working with people who are like-minded individuals who also have the same standard for quality, for work ethics. I think at the beginning, we work with someone, we may start with a conference paper, right? Get to know each other, and then later on, we can start something more serious together. I think that's a good approach. But, with my PhD advisor, I still work with them, on research projects, because that's a very, strong working relationship, because you know each other so well already. So working together, you know each other. There's not much you need to emphasize or communicate. Everybody knows what position they should. It's like playing soccer or playing basketball. Everybody knows their position, and they do their position really well. I don't know whether I answer your question. You also have another.
It's a great answer. Actually, I'm running from you about the research work and teamwork.
So your other question about research methodology, yes, absolutely right. And I think no matter which method we use, if we can demonstrate to the reviewers and the editors that our approach is very rigorous and we follow the best practices with that method, and I think people can see it. If we demonstrate, if we justify, if we show that we have done all the necessary steps If I'm doing scale development, what's the latest procedure that has been adopted in the mainstream marketing? Follow those, right? If we're using mixed methods approach, if you're using multi-source data to inform your understanding of a phenomenon, do that, follow that. And I think people can see it when you put your work together. As a researcher, especially, you know, if you have done research for 5 years, 10 years, and you would know when you finish writing the paper, what level of journal this paper can go to. You usually have some estimation. Sometimes that estimation may not be 100% correct or accurate, but in a lot of situations, we have some level of handling with that chance. Yeah.
Great. Wow.
Okay, let's move forward. And so this paper, we looked at sharing economy again. We developed a scale called co-creation experience, and we conceptualized the concept, developed a measurement scale to capture this phenomenon. And this was a paper coming out from the first author dissertation for the PhD studies. So basically that's what we did. And I know some of you also may know this authors, and maybe I can turn to this one. And so in this paper, we looked at service failure and service recovery in peer-to-peer accommodations. And Hyun-Soo and I started this project, and we worked on it on multiple phases and across multiple stages. We got to the point that the paper was published in the International Journal of Hospitality Management. And basically, we adopted attribution theory, and we investigated the nuances of service recovery and service failure by really adopting the lens of the triadic or multi-directional relationships between platform providers, for example, Airbnb, service providers, which the host, and customers, the visitors, the travelers, in the context of the peer-to-peer accommodation ecosystem. So we did multiple experimental studies, actually 2 pretest, 2 experimental design studies, and our results suggest that guest cost failure versus host cost or platform cost failure leads to the least negative outcomes in terms of recovery satisfaction and repurchase intention toward a host or a platform. So very importantly, in the past, when service failure and service recovery research was conducted, they tended to look at one provider and one customer, right? It's what we call the dyadic relationship. However, in the context of peer-to-peer or in the sharing economy, we have the platform in the middle as well. So you have the provider, the customer, and you have the platform working with both sides of the market, right? So the platform is serving both the customers, the individual consumers, as well as the host. The hosts are also paying fees to the platform. So that adds another level of complexity to the context of service failure and service recovery.
Okay, here's my question.
Yeah.
You look at the dyadic perspective, this one, right? And you said dyadic is supplier and consumer and platform, right?
Yeah, triadic, yes.
Triadic.
Triadic, yes.
Okay, so your insight, your contribution is take a look at the triadic perspective from platform business in order to recover service recovery, something like that, right?
Yeah. So basically, so in the sharing economy, there are multiple situations that could happen. So the platform can cause the failure.
Okay.
And the host can also cause the failure. So when the host causes a failure, the platform can handle, and the host can also handle. When there is a failure in the context of the accommodation, sometimes the customer can also participate in that recovery, joint recovery. So that perspective is relatively new in the context of service failure and service recovery.
Right.
In that research project, we also added another dimension, which is platform familiarity. Right?
Yes. The question why I ask you about this certain perspective is student, you must understand what the peer-to-peer platform business is. It's a triadic perspective, not dyadic perspective. Actually, we go to the research and find out the perspective from the certain specific business. And usually so far we are talking about the dyadic relationship between reviewer and consumer. But his paper is take the triadic perspective out of the platform business, which is a new approach, I guess. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So furthermore, I worked on another research project looking at consumer forgiveness in the sharing economy, because in the context of relationship, we can sometimes have an exchange relationship with an exchange partner. We can also formulate what we call a communal relationship with a partner. So what kind of relationship that you have with the provider, that may also affect the way you perceive or forgive a failure when that occurs in the context of the sharing economy. So that's what we did through multiple experimental studies. We provided insight to really understand consumer forgiveness in the context of the sharing economy of peer-to-peer accommodation versus conventional hospitality providers. In another study, also with Hyung-soo and a PhD student, we examined the moderating effects of typographic characteristics of various factors, trip-related situational factors, how they may affect consumers' value formation, the effects of value formations on the outcome measures. So this study really emphasized on the importance of understanding the various conditional effects of typographic characteristics, including length of stay, group size when you're traveling, as well as number of previous trips. Because results suggest that consumers see every trip as a purchase with some situational factors or characteristics. Last month, I traveled with my family, 2 kids and my wife, would be very different compared to last week where I traveled with my colleagues to attend a conference, right? In the 2 situations or purchase situations, the factors characterizing the trip are different, and therefore they exert different levels of effect on how we make our trip-related decisions, including our decision to utilize Airbnb or not. Okay. Research suggests that when we are traveling over a longer period of time with a larger group, we tend to use Airbnb. Okay. This very recent study, we used multi-source data including data from secondary text data, as well as consumer survey data to understand active value formation in the context of Airbnb. It's not published yet, but it has been accepted for publication. And there are a couple of other studies that I have been working on, but they are work in progress, such as a study looking at an underexplored area, which is the perceived fairness of accommodation tax held by Airbnb hosts. And now in the United States, different destinations have different tax policy for Airbnb hosts. In some destinations, they charge 2% at the state level and then 2% at the city level, right? And so you're really contributing money to the government like a hotel company. And for those hosts, when they provide tax to the local economy, they want to have a say on how the money is utilized to attract more tourists or fund other infrastructure within the destination. Okay. And because of time, because of the hiccup that we had at the beginning, so I'm going to speed up a little bit to make sure that I cover all the important contents. So I want to quickly go through this paper. This is also another paper that had multiple authors, very similar format, but this time we worked on a topic that is also related to the sharing economy, but this time we wanted to present a new perspective, the evolutionary perspective on the dynamics of service platform ecosystems for the sharing economy. And this team, we have researchers from Northwestern University and also a university from Belgium, as well as two other collaborators, including myself from the United States. So over a 12-month period, our team worked together to develop this paper. And finally, this paper was published in the Journal of Business Research, and really providing a slightly different perspective to understand the sharing economy. So why did we do that? Well, we saw that statistics suggest that peer-to-peer platforms continue to grow at a rapid pace, and Airbnb is one of the most successful peer-to-peer platforms. On any given night now, we are seeing 2 million people staying in Airbnb accommodations across the world. And now there are over 6 million Airbnb listings worldwide, and that number continues to increase. And think about it, Airbnb does not own, the large majority of the rooms. They were just providing the platform for customers and hosts to do transactions. This comes back to our lens to understand how the sharing economy ecosystem works differently. So the sharing economy business model basically added the service enabler into this process. In the past, we only had service provider and customer. That has always been the case in the context of business or services marketing. That's what we focused on. But now we have what we call the platform provider, the service enabler, such as Uber and Airbnb. So the relationship has changed from what we call a dyadic relationship to a triadic relationship. If we look at this ecosystem, it's easier for us to see that now there are three very important participants. The platform provider, we have the service providers, we also have the customers. Traditionally, we only had these two. Now we added a platform provider. In addition to that, we also have to acknowledge that this ecosystem cannot function if we only have these three groups. We also need to have what we call complementors. They offer products or services that add value to the core service, right? We have linen provider, we have food ingredients, food produce providers, beverage providers, to add value to the product that we offer in peer-to-peer accommodation. Now we go to peer-to-peer accommodation, we have nice linen, sometimes we have coffee, beans, coffee, drinks, everything ready for us, and sometimes maybe a bottle of wine, depending on what price point you are purchasing from. In addition to that, we have regulators, the policymakers, the lawmakers, right? And they are introducing policies to regulate the entire system. We have society, individual members of the community, the incumbents, the traditional business providers, like the hotel operators. They are considered as incumbents in the peer-to-peer accommodation setting because they were the original operators in the business. Okay, but they are challenged by the providers within the sharing economy. Same as taxi operators, right? In some destinations, you pay so much to have the license to operate a taxi, but now everybody with a vehicle can take customers, right? Where would their investment go? Right? That's a very interesting question for us to answer. And
Kevin,
yes,
I have a question.
Mhm.
Through your Airbnb research perspective, I'm very much feel impressed from your research perspective as such a kind of a tax. Okay, we are talking about tax a lot and peer-to-peer business, tax issue between country to country. Anyway, I've been researching regarding this area as well, but I never think about the tax issue between players. And also recently I have submitting to the International Journal of Hospitality Management about the platform stress, which is actually the platform stress, which explains between the headquarters located in United States, Airbnb headquarters in the United States. But actually the service provider is a local base from Korea. So there are huge gaps between headquarters and the suppliers about a management scale, management style, and the communication style, and then policy style. So I believe there must be the platform stress among the players. What do you think?
Yes. So in some previous research, we discussed the idea that in some contexts, when the assets are not owned by the platform, then they have less control over the quality and the experience that customers are going to get. So when you look at platform like Zipcar, they own all the cars, so they have greater control. However, in the context of Airbnb, you are absolutely right. Airbnb does not have great control over what experiences customers can get when they stay at the individual property. So what they have done is they introduced this idea of superhost. So if you keep your overall customer ratings above certain level, then you earn the status. You have the status of being a superhost. And when you have that status, you tend to take a lot of time to preserve that, to protect that, because that gives a lot of advantages to your business. Right? So I think that's very important from a management point of view. I think that's also a question that was relevant at the beginning when international hotel chains introduced their brands in many different countries. And so they did not have a lot of control over consumer expectations and the specific experiences. Some employees may not be well trained to provide the same, say, Hilton experience or Marriott experience to their customers. And in the context of Airbnb, that's even more serious from a management point of view. So we acknowledge that that's a concern, but Airbnb is doing everything they can to manage those experiences. Yeah. So because of time, I will skip some of the statistics, and then I focus on the important contents. In that way, we finish on time, but you are also getting all the information that's important. So we looked at different platforms. There are multiple types of platforms that we can find in the platform business models. We have search platforms like Google. We have communication platform, social media platform, matching platform, content and review platform. I know Dr. Khu has done some great work on online reviews. So that's a very important area as well. Booking aggregator, retail platform, payment platform, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, various types of platforms. But in our research, we have largely focused on platform business models in the service sector that match capacity constrained access and resources with consumer demand. What it means is that capacity constraint is you have limited capacity, like Uber rides. During peak hours, you have limited number of cars that can serve customers. Same as Airbnb, there is a period with higher demand, maybe during school holidays, etc. Those are the platforms that we focus on. So in this paper, we provided a new perspective from an evolutionary perspective to see really how platform will evolve over time. We have seen that there are multiple actors in the system. The strategic action of any group would also trigger the responses from another group, right? Airbnb is doing really well, and their hotels are doing something in response to the actions of Airbnb, right? When Airbnb does something, when hotel does something, then Airbnb can also respond. All these actors are interacting with each other. When there is huge growth in terms of Airbnb listings, the regulator will take some actions to manage this process. Okay, so basically what we did was we argue that the ecosystem, ecology, and evolutionary perspective provides a useful lens for understanding business changes at the intersection of platform economics and service management. We adopted evolutionary theory and the ecology literature to understand how this business ecosystem can also happen in the context of peer-to-peer consumption, where you have multiple actors. Okay. They are interacting within their own group, like this model here. We have the core of the model. We have the platform owner, service providers. They are interacting within their own group. But at the same time, they're interacting with each other as well, right? Customer versus with service provider, customer with platform, etc. And in the macro environment, we have incumbents, we have media, we have regulators. Those are really interacting with multiple actors within the core of the system, which is the micro environment. So that really forms the entire service platform ecosystem. So they interact with each other within the same group, like service providers, maybe Uber drivers interact with Uber drivers. That's what we call within species interactions. And then we have platform owner. Uber is interacting with customers. That's what we call between species interactions. So they're interacting with another group. So we have some examples with Uber Eats. And in the model here, I also provided some examples such as Uber, restaurant, food suppliers, delivery drivers, and how they are represented in this micro level species model. I think I covered that already. Within species interactions and between species interactions. And all these interactions are going to change how the system will evolve over time, because every group is going to learn how to adapt the changes in the environment. And they also make changes in order to preserve and protect their own interests and benefits. We can move a little bit quicker with this part. So in this environment, when different actors evolve over time, we also have this process, what we call a winner-take-all situation. There may be a lot of peer-to-peer platforms that exist in peer-to-peer accommodation sector. But over time, you only have the few that are dominating the market. And maybe eventually there is one or two that are dominating the market. So this phenomenon is called winner-take-all. In peer-to-peer accommodation, Airbnb is dominating the market. And then the second player, you have VRBO, but that's nothing compared to Airbnb. So in this paper, we consider not only how it will evolve, but how quickly the entire system will change over time, depending on multiple factors that could be categorized under platform characteristics. For example, we just said that there are situations where capacity are unconstrained, like sharing video, sharing content. But at the same time, a lot of services are capacity constraints, like Uber, like Airbnb, like WeWork, etc., or tools that people share these days. We also have external factors or trends, which we describe as exogenous shocks that can affect the entire ecosystem, such as COVID-19 and the adoption of technology and artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, Airbnb relies heavily on technology. It's a technology-mediated platform, right? And that's their advantage. We also have macro species actions, the regulation from different governments. In the context of Uber, we can argue, well, Uber drivers, are they employees of Uber company? If yes, then we need to provide retirement fund. We need to provide insurance and many other things to Uber drivers. In the United States, they tried to propose that, but it was very difficult to get through. But in the UK, it went through. The government acknowledged that those are actually employees of Uber, and therefore Uber had to provide benefits, okay, associated with human resources. I think I touched on some of these already, so I can move this part a little bit quicker. And so basically, from a research point of view, there are a lot of aspects that we can look at. Basically, how can we come up with high quality data to describe the entire ecosystem and to monitor the changes of the system? How can we get data from multiple actors? In what way the data can provide us with some good measurement of the changes, as well as the speed of the changes? I think that's a big question for a lot of us to answer. some future research areas. So Hyung-soo and I did some, quick analysis. Basically, we did a search using sharing economy, collaborative consumption in marketing and service management journals with a total of 937 publications altogether from 2006 to 2022. And to understand what may be some of the areas that are up and coming that are also attracting the attention of a lot of researchers. Since 2020, the main keywords as colored in yellow have been related to topics such as machine learning, COVID-19, digital platforms, psychological ownership, service innovation, etc. So those are the important directions. Seems like those are important directions moving forward, but we also have other contents. In the hospitality and tourism literature, we are seeing areas such as spatial econometrics, service failure, dining experience, word of mouth communications, as well as pricing, particularly dynamic pricing. And these are the areas that are driving some of the recent research projects published in our field. Some directions for future research. We talked about the different types of sharing platforms. We have capacity constraint versus unconstrained assets, right? But in a lot of tourism and hospitality related studies, we focus a lot more on capacity constrained assets. But what are the implications for revenue models, or how do consumers respond differently in those different formats of sharing, right? Those are important questions for us to answer. Other types of access-based platforms, right? And we have seen renting, we have seen sharing, right? What may be some of the important different consumer responses when they are engaging with service providers in different situations. Convergence of business models, which we looked at in one paper, but there are a lot more questions that can be answered in terms of value creation, value capture, optimal access mix, and in what situations companies should engage in convergence tactics or strategies. In what situations they should not do that. So those are also very big questions to answer for the industry. Government intervention, right? So how do government agencies engage, or how should they engage with operators in the industry as well as platforms, right? At the end of the day, you want them to be operating on the market, but at the same time, you also need to manage the interests of the traditional business operators, like the hotel industry. In a lot of destinations, the hotel industry is funding the DMO's marketing budget. The entire budget for DMO in a lot of situations, in a lot of destinations, come from the hotel industry in the form of accommodation tax. Some places call occupancy tax, right? You need to satisfy the interests of the hotel industry. The broader ecosystem, right? We looked at the sharing economy ecosystem. What about the ecosystem of other sectors that are operating in the local economy?
Okay, Dr. Kevin, so I think you still left a few slides, but we have a lack of time. So why don't you give the chance to students they have a lot of question for you, personal question or official question, research question. So we have 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
I wrap up 2 more slides that I feel that was important. And so those are the questions that I answered already. So I think a very important part for us to understand is from a marketing point of view, there are a lot of areas that we can address for the sharing economy. And if we break it down, they could be under marketing institutions, for example, the consumers, the regulators, and all other companies or entities that exist on the market. We can also look at it from a process perspective where we can describe, different areas that can be further studied, such as branding, innovation, okay, as well as delivering that ultimate consumer experience to the customer. How can that be engineered in a way that we are providing a superior experience to our customers? And then the last one is value creation, right? In the wider ecosystem, everybody participates in the system to gain some value, to gain some benefits. How can we function in a way that we are addressing the interests and benefits of every single party within the ecosystem? So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you very much. This is some of the photos that I took in my spare time, and now that's how I spend my spare time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kevin So. Your great presentation. You're inspiring us very much. Wow. Okay, students, it's your time. You can ask whatever you want to know from him.
Hello, Doctor.
Professor.
Okay.
You may go first.
Oh, okay, Hanjin.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question. So first of all, thank you for sharing the knowledge today, and it was really great time to understand about the sharing economy. So I believe that sharing economy business or the platform that they provide can provide better experiences for the customers or tourists, that they can have more choices based on their preferences. And you have mentioned that economic value of sharing economic business will be equivalent to the traditional business in 2025. And I believe that the sharing economy economic business model is in trend, and it will continue to grow in the future. However, I believe there are various issues, especially in Korea, that we have to deal with to commercialize the sharing economic platform, such as Airbnb. In Korea, actually, Airbnb service is illegal among domestic travelers or the residents, but only international travelers can utilize the service. And also the transportation service like Uber is strictly prohibited by law in Korea due to social, political, and other various issues. So those business like hotel resorts or other type of traditional accommodation providing companies opposite to the legalizing Airbnb service in Korea, since they will lose some opportunities, and the sharing economy accommodation service can be threats to those traditional companies. So I believe that they have a triadic relationship among all the stakeholders involved in this business model, but all of them have a different perspectives on understanding the platform. So my question is, how can we balance those issues, and how can we balance their different perspectives when we are actually commercializing the sharing economic services in tourism industry? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think the sharing economy and the growth of the sharing economy is really dependent upon how open the local economy is. And as we have seen with Airbnb as well as Uber, not every country, not every destination is accepting it like what we have seen in some other developed countries. And that's something that we need to acknowledge. And that's why when you look at those incumbent businesses, they have strong say in the process, because at the end of the day, they are major players in contributing the tax revenue to the government. And so they have huge influence. And for every hotel industry that you see, I know in the United States, but also in Korea and many other destinations, you have the lodging association or something similar. and they lobby really hard for the hotel industry to protect and the benefits of the operators. So that's not something that can be easily addressed. And every destination, every country has a different situation. I can give you an example in the context of Hong Kong. You know, in Hong Kong, when international tourists travel to Hong Kong, they would usually take the red cab, the taxi. And 5 or 10 years ago, buying that license is almost $1 million just to buy that license, to operate the taxi. And if you have a license, you don't need to run the taxi. You can rent out the license to company. They operate the rental for you. And each month you're taking almost $2,000 as return, like rental income for that license. So imagine those owners, they're not giving up their right to operate the business and let all the Uber drivers to just operate with a car and take their customers. I think a lot of those situations are very difficult for commercializing freely the sharing economy operations. And I have seen in some other places where Airbnb is not allowed. So you cannot do that. And some destinations require a license to do that. If you can do Airbnb, but you need to go through the process of licensing. But in the United States, it's not as complicated. A lot of people would buy the second property and just rent it out to get additional income to pay for mortgage. So I think if you look at different destinations, they have characteristics that limit their ability to commercialize the sharing economy operations in different sectors.
Okay. Actually, platform business is invented by United States. And the United States market is winner takes all. They don't care the current company forms. They destroyed current one and then invent a new one. That's the culture of America. It's a tough culture. Anyway, next question.
Yes, hi, Professor. My question is based on your approach to the evolutionary theory. Since the economy, the platform business is a winner takes it all situation, and looking at our old traditional business is based on the scarcity, where when the business grows, the profit gets decreased. And however, the platform service, on the other hand, as the revenue grows and the business size gets bigger, the profit also exponentially grows. So I was thinking that when you were applying that evolutionary theory to your studies, I thought it was more like a Big Bang theory instead of applying the revolutionary theory. Did you have any concerns when you were applying that? And another question builds from there. It's a winner takes it all business, so that the regulations and restrictions from the government or any kind of independent organization should be involved in the business to kind of prevent any harms from the monopolies, where this could be very harmful to the customers and overall economy and ecosystem. Did you have any findings on the importance of the regulations to interfere in between?
Right. So I think the question, if I interpret that correctly, at the end, we're in the paper, we suggest that, there is this situation where you have winner takes all, it could also be several winners that take all. And that's more likely to happen in a lot of situations. And so in ride sharing, for example, in the United States, it's Uber and Lyft. So these are the two major ones. We don't see other smaller ones. With peer-to-peer accommodation, the two major ones, I will probably say Airbnb and VRBO. There are some, the third largest, fourth largest, but they are much, much smaller. They exist, they may be able to do some listing and transactions, but they are nowhere near what we have seen with particularly Airbnb. So I think over time, the market happens like that in a lot of industries, where for platform business model, it is very important for them to establish what we call network effect. So I could establish a platform, I could have a lot of customers, but if I don't have a lot of hosts, these customers would not continue to go to my platform, right? And the same thing, if I have a platform, I do a really good job to attract a lot of hosts, but when I don't, if I have a lot of hosts, I don't have customers, then these hosts are not going to come to me. So for me to be successful, I need to have a strong volume of customers as well as hosts, because I'm providing a marketplace for them to do transaction. You will only go when you have a lot of options, when your needs are served, right? And in the context of Airbnb, particularly Airbnb, consumers have different needs, different expectations, different wants, okay, different preferences. And only when you have multiple, a lot of listing volume for you to be able to attract a large volume of customers. At the same time, when you have large volume of customers, then those new hosts, when they want to find a platform to list their property, they go to Airbnb. So we have done some recent research interviewing existing Airbnb hosts to understand why they choose Airbnb. It was basically the largest on the market, easy, everybody is using that. So they started using it. So having those network effect, the volume is going to make a huge difference. And that's why the smaller ones.
Professor Kevin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And we are almost, our time is up. Anyway, one last year comment toward our students as your senior researcher, professor, and then challenges. Okay, please. Yeah.
Challenges, right? For me?
Your life challenge.
Okay, my life challenge. I think I always say to even PhD students, my PhD students who I work with very closely, and I have a strong interest in their success. When they become successful, I could be the happiest person in the world. That's how I put it. And so I always say that we only have a limited time in a day, 24 hours. Everybody has 24 hours, no difference. You cannot maximize that. So how you're going to utilize the 24 hours makes a huge difference. And that's why time management is important. And it's not just about work, but also enjoy life, enjoy time, and enjoy the time with family members and your good friends. And that's also a very important part. It's not just about work. Yeah, that's how I would put it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kevin. So as you've seen, I sharing your CV and your personal homepage with our students. So may our students they now understand who you are and what you achieved so far. So definitely, I invite you again the next semester. Keep us inspiring.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My apologies for the hiccup, never happened in the last 5 years.
Okay.
So I remember this presentation very clearly.
I know you
I enjoy the
State
interaction.
University.
Sorry?
Okay, I'm very thankful to your attention and presentation. And next semester, we look forward to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.